30 years ago, I was a journalist covering President Bush Sr. on the 1992 presidential election. I got to meet every editor of every major daily. One editor offered me the city beat for $16,500 a year. A friend told me they were hiring teachers for $25,000 a year. So I became an educator. A friend of mine who's passed on, he said there's the expression garbage in, garbage out. That's wrong. Garbage in, garbage stay. If somebody tells you you're worthless enough, you start believing you're worthless. I believe somebody tells you you're awesome enough, you start believing you're awesome. Stop bragging. Stop telling people about your successes. Start telling people about your failures, because not everybody in your audience has succeeded, but they've all failed. The more you share your own failures, the more your audience is going to see themselves in you.
Welcome back to Hindsight the Podcast. I'm Lee Jones, your host. And have you ever wondered how mastering what you read and how you speak could become the quiet engine behind your business growth? Today, I'm joined by Dr. Danny Brassell. Now, you just told me how to say it. Brassell?
It's Brassell, but it's fine. It doesn't matter.
It's S-E-L-L too, and I still said Brassell. I think it's because I was in the military and we used to shine our boots with Brassell. So I went with
there
Brassell.
you go. I'm envious of Jones. Jones, you don't get like a Jonas, or it's just Jones. It's nice.
Just Jones. They used to call me Honace when I was in the Army. So. All right. Dr. Danny Brassell, an internationally recognized expert in leadership, motivation, and communication, who has spent nearly 3 decades advising everyone from preschoolers to rocket scientists. And together, we're going to unpack what Danny calls a powerful communication triangle: reading, speaking, and business, and how you can use it to build the future you really want. Now, good morning. Thank you for showing up, Danny. And I say thank you for showing up, not because he didn't show up, because we had this schedule before and I didn't show up. Actually, I didn't have any internet connection, and he's graciously come back on Hindsight the Podcast. I just want to thank you, sir, for that.
Oh, you're awesome, Lee. Thanks so much for having me. No worries at all. Things happen, man.
Yeah. But before we get going, and I know I'm going to let you talk about yourself, but I want to talk about you just before we get started. Spoken to over 3,500 audiences worldwide. Authored 21 books, maybe in counting, I don't know, including Leadership Begins with Motivation and Misfits and Crackpots. Co-founded the Well-Crafted Story to help people convert speaking engagements to leads. But most importantly, you're known as Jim Carrey with a PhD. Tell me a little bit about Jim Carrey with a PhD. Obviously, it's got to be about the personality, but when you talk about yourself, because I'm going to ask you to tell us a little about it. It's Hindsight the Podcast, how you got to be who you are today. But when you tell us that, please include why you're called Jim Carrey with a PhD.
Well, I learned, because I've taught, like you said, I've taught all ages from preschoolers to rocket scientists. And what I learned is what works with 12th graders does not necessarily work with kindergartners, but what works with kindergartners works with all age levels. And I have a policy. I take my job seriously. I don't take myself too seriously, because I ain't all that, and neither are you. And if you think you're all that, teach kindergarten for a week. Those little ones will set you straight. One of my little girls, LaShonda, raises her hand one day. I'm like, LaShonda, question. She's like, Miss Brassell, when are you going to trim your nose hair? I'm like, this afternoon. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. I ain't all that.
I need to do mine too.
We're getting there, Lee. As you get older, man.
Oh, man. I think I've reached there. I think I've gotten to there. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you got to be who you are today. Just a little bit.
If I was going to write an autobiography, Lee, it would probably be called Pivots, because I feel like I've already lived 9 lives. 30 years ago, I was a journalist covering President Bush Sr. on the 1992 presidential election. I loved my job. Got to meet every editor of every major daily. One editor offered me the city beat for $16,500 a year. Meanwhile, a friend told me they were hiring teachers in South Central Los Angeles for $25,000 a year. So I became an educator for the noblest of reasons, Lee, for the high pay. And I actually fell in love with teaching. And I've taught all age levels. And eventually, I was teaching engineering students English as a second language at the University of Southern California. And in 2005, My wife and I attended a real estate seminar, which turned out to be a scam, and we lost everything. And I could give you the woe is me story, but I'm a positive person. I learned a lot from
Mm,
the experience. First of all,
mm,
I learned that my wife is my soulmate. I put her through the ringer and she stood right by me. She's an incredible human being. Second of all, I learned that money's not everything because you can lose money just like that. Third, I try not to judge other people, Lee, because if I was somebody who saw what I had done, I would have said, well, you deserve that. But now I realize unless you know everything about a person, you really don't know anything about a person. Fourth, I became a Christian, which I'm always embarrassed to confess. It took a catastrophe to bring me there. But the more I read my Bible, I realize I'm not the first screw up to find Jesus. And then fifth, I didn't want to file bankruptcy. And my accountant said, well, you have to make this much more money this year. And so I started speaking on the side and I hit that number right on the number.
mm.
Well, then the next year, Lee, he gave me a much higher number. And I hit that number right on the number. So in year three, I thought, well, maybe I should set a higher number. And basically, during one of the worst economic downturns in American history, I was able to build up a highly lucrative speaking business, which eventually attracted the attention of some pretty famous people and companies who wanted me to coach them. I have to confess, Lee, I really resisted coaching for a long time because you need to know this about me. I'm obsessive compulsive. I have a very high standard for my students. I will not let you fail. I will be on your back holding you accountable until you succeed. Well, now that I work primarily with entrepreneurs, executives, and business owners, I find they're highly motivated. They do the work, and it's probably been the most rewarding thing I've ever done.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Pivot would probably be very powerful title that accurately describes your journey to this point. And I really appreciate you sharing that really quick about the real estate scam that you know the training or whatever that you went through. How did that help to define who you are? Because that you said you lost everything. You said your wife stayed with you through that. You put her through the ringer, all of these different things. So that was a traumatic part from my perspective,
Mhm.
just hearing it of your life. How did that how did that incident or that time in your life kind of define who you are now?
Well, and I said I lost everything, but I didn't. I lost everything financially. I kept my wife, I kept my family, I kept my
Exactly.
health. Perspective is a valuable thing. You were in the military, you know that adversity makes you stronger. Actually, well, you have the choice all the
Yeah.
time. I see a lot of people, they take the worst moment of their life and they stay in that moment for the rest of their lives. And then there's other people that take the worst moment and they turn it into lemonade. And so I chose to grow from it, and it was good because it gave me humility. And I think all of us need a pretty important dose of humility nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree. Just being able to take a look back and not thinking you're the greatest thing since whatever you want to put in there, right? Because we all
Yep.
go through things. We all, I
Mhm.
can look at you and talk to you today and I can see successful you, right? But we've all been through those journeys, those ups and those downs. And it's really your choice on how you react
Mhm.
to those situations. Some are harder than others. Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. But you always have a choice. So I appreciate you bringing it up. So when you think about your own journey, what was the first moment you realized that reading, speaking, and business weren't separate lanes, but a triangle that all fed each other?
Well, it was basically out of necessity, Lee. I mean, I was broke and I needed to earn money. I wasn't earning money as a teacher. And so I started speaking. And, when I work with people that want to, most of the people I work with don't want to be speakers. I just show them how to use speaking to grow their business. But the people that
Yeah.
actually want to be speakers, for example, I was working with a woman last week and she's like, I want to be a $10,000 an hour speaker. And I said, okay. Do you look like a $10,000 an hour speaker? And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, do you have a website? She's like, no. I'm like, do you have a speaking reel? She's like, no. I'm like, do you have video testimonials? No. Do you have a brochure? No. I'm like, so let me ask you, are you a $10,000 an hour speaker? I mean, you got to look the
Yeah.
role.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you are, but perception is 9 tenths of the law. So, or whatever, it's percentages, right? But anyway, you get what I'm
Yeah, yeah.
saying.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. I get it. Yeah. So, you know, I when I'm looking at it, I mean, reading is everything's kind of just kind of accidentally actually, I shouldn't say accidentally. I don't believe in accidents. I believe in
Okay.
providence. And it's ironic that I became this reading ambassador because I hated reading growing up. My father was a librarian. I always hated the public library. It always smelt funny to me. The furniture was uncomfortable. There was always some elderly woman telling me to be quiet. There's always some homeless guy hanging out by the bookshelves, thinks he's a vampire. I always hated it. Uh, and it wasn't until I started teaching in South Central where I saw a lot of my students didn't have the advantages I had growing up. And I basically said, shame on me. I mean, I was blessed, Lee. Both of my parents were in the home. We were poor, but we always had food on the table. And my parents always read in front of us kids, to us kids, and we had plenty of access to reading materials. And it kind of ticked me off. I'm like, wait a second, not everybody's getting a fair shake. And so I really started emphasizing to the kids, hey, we got to be better than everybody else, you know. And I always tell my students, sometimes you need somebody else to believe in you before you believe in yourself. I believe in all of you. They only give me the best and the brightest. Let's go out and make this world a better place. Yeah. And I believe a friend of mine who's passed on, he was a great speaker, Keith Harrell. He said, there's the expression garbage in, garbage out. He's like, that's wrong. Garbage in, garbage stays. You know, if somebody tells you you're worthless enough, you start believing you're worthless. But here's the counterpoint. I believe somebody tells you you're awesome enough, you start believing you're awesome. And I can work that into, and that's really what the whole basis for my teaching was getting people to believe in themselves and really do things that they never thought capable. And that's basically because I've been blessed throughout my life to have lots of wonderful parents, coaches, and parents that believed in me.
Yeah. So for someone who secretly believes I'm not a reader or I'm not a speaker, how do you start to rewrite that story for them?
Well, we'll start with reading, you know, because parents always are asking me, well, how do I get my kid to read? I'm like, well, find out what they're interested in. You know, when I was teaching second grade, I had a little boy, Kiara, and Kiara's first grade teacher told me, Kiara don't know nothing. I'm like, well, thank you for that. Well, Kiara, who don't know nothing, he comes into my classroom. Now, Lee, this is a long time ago. He comes in my classroom one day. He's like, hey, Miss Brassell, you see Barkley last night? He had 18 points, 16 boards. I'm like, thank you, Kiara. Because from that day forward, Lee, every single day, I put Kiara on my lap after lunch. We'd read the LA Times sports page. And by the end of the year, Kiara was one of my best readers. And all that kid ever read about was sports. I always say this to parents. You need to understand this. You know, our research is really clear on this. It doesn't matter what you read. What matters is how much you read. It doesn't matter if you're reading James Joyce or James and the Giant Peach. People who read more read better. And so the little boy who only reads Captain Underpants is going to become a better reader than the little boy who refuses to read anything. Captain Underpants is the gateway drug to Shakespeare, but you got to get the kid hooked first. I mean, I was teaching 8th grade special ed in Watts, and it wasn't special ed. It was 16 boys that nobody else wanted to teach. 8 African-American, 8 Latino. If their life wasn't miserable enough, they got the white dude as the teacher, and he made them read all the time. And they like, man, I hate this stupid Shakespeare or whatever. I'm like, wait a second, guys, you have to understand this. Romeo and Juliet, the Montagues and the Capulets, they're just gangs. This is like the Bloods and the Crips. Like, what? I'm like, yeah. And you know how they're talking funny? It's like people think you talk funny. No, that's just the way they talk. And I was blessed because great author Walter Mosley, he's from Watts. He has some really great books. One of my favorites is called Always Outnumbered, Always Outgunned. And so I was able to take that book and compare it to Romeo and Juliet. Now the guy's like, man, what else is Shakespeare written? I'm like, good. Now I got you interested. You know, and I know it's weird. And so that's what you got to hook people that way. Like my first strategy with parents, you know, a lot of parents say, I got nothing to read at home. I'm like, oh, but you do. You know, I don't know if you know this, but every television set in America by law is required to have closed captioning. Turn on the closed captioning. And a parent will say, well, wait a sec, if the show's in English and the subtitles are in English, what good does that do? I'm like, well, that's a fair point, but let me make this point. Have you ever watched a show with closed captioning and not looked at the subtitles? It's very difficult to do. Your brain's actually directed towards the text, and there's actual research to support this. If you look at reading scores around the world, the more kids watch TV, the lower their reading scores are in every country on the planet except for one. The country where kids watch the most TV also has the highest reading scores in the world. It's Finland. And people always say, well, how can that be? I'm like, well, because Finland makes really bad TV shows. And so what they got to do is they import all these old American sitcoms like Good Times and Welcome Back, Kotter, and they have to subtitle them in Finnish. The kids are reading all the time. So turn on the subtitles on the TV. So these are the ways to get people reading. People always ask me, well, what's the link between readers and leadership? I'm like, well, I know plenty of people that read that don't necessarily become effective leaders, but I can't name a single effective leader in history that was not also an avid reader. And it doesn't matter what you're talking about. I mean, in the military, General Patton read voraciously. General Schwarzkopf, they say he could read in 4 languages and quote Shakespeare voraciously. You look at business, Elon Musk, one of the wealthiest man in the world, he still reads a book a day. Warren Buffett reads from the moment he gets to his office to the time he leaves his office. You're looking at sports. I could have kissed LeBron James when he was playing the NBA Finals with the Miami Heat. They showed him in the locker room before the game. He was reading The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Like, dude, you just did more to get kids interested in reading than I'll ever be able to do. And so, I mean, remember that football game with the Philadelphia Eagles? They showed Antonio Brown on the sideline reading a book. I wanted to kiss the guy. I'm like, thank you. I mean, but it doesn't matter what you read. Like, if you're an entrepreneur, here's my suggestion to you: read books about entrepreneurs. If you want to become the world's greatest, I mean, Bill Belichick, the greatest NFL football coach of all time, he also had the largest football book library of all time, donated it to his university. And so that's why reading is so important. And the way it led to the speaking, it's people like, why do you read so much? I'm like, I'll read a full book and the book can stink, but if there's one little story in there that I can use in a speech, it was well worth my time. I mean, I read a book a couple of weeks ago. It was a marketing book. And it was really a bad book, to tell you the truthfully. But there was one story which made it worth the entire read. It was about this marketer. He's looking around the world. What can I make a lot of money on?
Yeah.
Couldn't find anything. He's stuck in Chile. He's watching these fishermen. They're fishing, and he notices they're catching one type of fish and throwing these extra fish in this other bucket, and they're eating the other fish. He's like, oh, are you eating that other fish because you get paid to catch this fish and throw away this fish? And they're like, well, yeah, but also this fish is actually tastier. He's like, well, may I try it? And they're like, sure. So he tries. He's like, wow, this is really good. What's it called? They're like, the toothfish. He's like, the toothfish? He's like, that's the worst name I've ever heard. And he starts thinking about it. And so he introduces it to the United States. It's now the #1 fish sold in restaurants, at fine restaurants around America. He just renamed it the Chilean sea bass. There's the power of marketing. I'm like, that's awesome. So that's why I'll use I mean, that's why I'm reading all the time. I'm looking for anecdotes. That's why I listen to your podcast is, there's always a gem. There's usually 3 gems. And I'm like, I'm listening for them all the time. And I was watching this horrible show on TV last week called The News. And all it did was depress me. I listen to your podcast because it puts a smile on my face because I'm like, man, I don't even know why I went to university because I can listen to your podcast and I'm already getting these nuggets. I don't even have to pay for it. So,
well, I tell you what, I 100% agree with you on the news. At least national news. At least, local news, they try to sprinkle some good stories, some good feel stories in there, right? Definitely in California. I don't know about the rest of the country. But yeah, national news, I just stay away from it. I stay away from it. Hey, so you read a lot, you get these anecdotes and you apply them to your speaking or you apply them to trying to teach or convey a message. I read a lot or I listen to audiobooks a lot as well.
Good.
Usually I'm walking the dog and I'll get on, listen to an audiobook. But here's the challenge for me. I'll hear these amazing things. And I'm like, oh, this is perfect. I've been trying to figure out how to convey this message. They did it perfectly. I want to be able to, but it's an audiobook and I'm walking a dog and I don't capture that moment. I try to bookmark it. I try to do all of these different things, but it just doesn't. What's like a strategy maybe that you have done that has been successful since you are definitely the subject matter expert in this?
Yeah, I mean, most people waste their time on these things on social media. That's nonsense. What I would do is that's a perfect time for your dog to do a number 2 while you pause the audiobook and on your phone, I would just start taking the notes. And that's what I do all the time. And I'll pause the book and I'll take some notes about something I hear. I listen to audiobooks all the time. By the way, those count. I was listening to the Will Smith autobiography, the actor Will Smith, is actually really good because he narrates it. And the very first chapter he talks about as a kid, he had to build a brick wall for his dad. And his dad always emphasizes that the way you build a brick wall is one brick at a time. And it was a really important life lesson. So that's what I would be doing is taking notes as I walk. Just pause and let the dog do its business while you take care of your business.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Yeah, I think the last book that I was listening to was the Self Delusion. Can't remember
Mm.
the guy's name. The book is right there on the desk over there. But great book. It just talks about how our recollection of the past is flawed, in how, just different information influences, what we remember about the
Everybody always
past.
we only remember the good stuff. We don't remember the bad stuff. I mean, it's funny
R-
because one of my aunts, she's a nurse, and she's telling all of her coworkers, she's like, "Oh man, I wish it was the 40s and 50s again. Everything was perfect back in the 40s and 50s." Well, my aunt, all of her coworkers are African American. They're like, "Girl, it
I
wasn't
know.
so."
I know. Let's rethink that. You say that in the house by yourself, because it wasn't all
Yeah,
that
yeah,
great.
exactly.
But so when you talk about the communication triangle, how
Mhm.
do you define the relationship between reading, speaking, and business growth in simple terms?
Well, I mean, when you're really just trying to build your business, there's no quicker way than through speaking. And
Yeah.
I most of the people I work with, they're either terrified to speak or they have no interest in speaking. And I say, yeah, but communication is the currency of the 21st century, and you need to be able to tell your story. And so that's why you read lots of stories. I can't think of the last time I read a book where it starts off with a whole bunch of facts.
Mm.
I'll give you I'll give you the Bible as a perfect example. Jesus is the most frustrated teacher on the planet because he's always sitting there talking to his apostles and they're not getting it. He's like, "All right, let me tell you a story." And so he
Yes.
tells a story so they'll get it. And I'll make this point, Lee. I bet you 9 out of 10 non-Christians are familiar with the story of the Good Samaritan. They're familiar with
Mm.
the story of the prodigal son. They're familiar with the story of David and Goliath.
Yeah.
I'll also make the point that I bet you 9 out of 10 Christians cannot tell you the 10 commandments. And the
Mm.
reason is because the 10 commandments were not presented as a story. They were presented as a PowerPoint slide with 10 bullet points. People don't remember that. They remember stories, and that's the power of storytelling. And so this is where I'm trying to guide your audience to think about this. Stop. Of all people, it was Joseph Stalin who said, "A million dead is a statistic. One person dead is a tragedy." Translation: facts tell, but stories sell. Facts inform, but stories transform. That's why I watch the Olympics. I don't watch the Olympics because I'm into the 400-meter dash. I don't even know what it is most of the time. I'm into the Olympics because right before the 400-meter dash, they're like, "Oh, and there's Patapa Patata from Uganda," and then they show him. He's like, "I learned how to run, running away from the bullets in my village." I'm like, "Oh
That's
my gosh,
true.
I'm so rooting for this guy," because there's a story behind it. Or I was watching NFL Network yesterday, and one of the leading defensive ends in the NFL, he plays for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And first of all, he was the most well-spoken person and kindest. I was just listening to him, like, wow, what a nice guy. But
Hmm.
he was talking about how his son just overcame leukemia, and
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, you're trying to play in the NFL, and your son has leukemia? I mean, that's life. I mean, it gets back to what we were talking about. Losing a whole bunch of money, whatever. I can replace money, but
Yeah.
losing a kid, I mean, that's real. So, I mean, that
Right.
touched me. It's been going through my mind ever since I watched that. So that's the power of storytelling.
I tell you what, that's great analogy, or great, not, I'll say analogy. It's not really an analogy, but that's a great description, because I watch football now. And when I look at football, because I like writing as well. And when I look
Mhm.
at football, I'm like, man, that was an amazing story. First, you hear the stories, the individual stories about some of the combatants, the players who are out there on the field, right? And you hear these caring stories, these sharing stories, how they, contribute to certain organizations, their time, their money, philanthropy. And then you hear about the health things, in life and death things that are going on in their lives. And then you have the game. And there's this David versus Goliath, especially when the underdog comes back and wins it, right? So you're invested in the story of the game. And when I tell people this, they were like, "Oh, it's just a football game." But I'm like, it's so much more if you just really tap into it. And I
Yeah.
believe I don't know what it used to do back in the 70s and the 80s of football, but I believe this was a deliberate and tell me if I'm wrong or not, attempt to draw the female audience in as well, right? To tell a lot of these stories. Because for me, I was just fine watching them football, watching them play football, watching tackles, touchdowns. I loved Lynn Swan when I was a kid, catching those amazing, making those amazing catches. Now I'm more invested in the story, of the people who are actually playing. You get a lot more of that now. And it could just be technology. It just
I
could be
never thought of
access.
Yeah, I never thought about that, Lee. You might be right about that. What I would encourage you to do is I've read biography. I read Roone Arledge's biography. He was he ran ABC Sports and then ABC News, and then
Uh-huh.
he mentored Dick Ebersol, who wound up taking over NBC. And in Dick Ebersol's autobiography, he talks about the importance that he learned from Roone about storytelling. He's like, no, no, no. Because Roone created ABC Wide World of Sports, which I got to confess, when I was a kid, I know you're the same age. If you're Lynn, I actually took a ballet class because I found out Lynn Swan had taken a ballet class. I just love Lynn Swan. Andy's a Trojan. I always loved to watch the beginning of ABC Wide World of Sports because they'd have Jim McKay, and he's like, you know, the thrill of victory, dun 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 dun, and then they show the skier, pooh, and the agony of defeat. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
you tell the guy weight training or whatever. And I'm like, man, I was totally into it. It was all storytelling, and then I don't remember who was at CBS. I had read that guy's biography too. The guy at CBS, because if you look at in the 80s, before Pat Summerall and John Madden would do their games, and they don't do this anymore as well. They'd have Pat Summerall doing a narration. It'd be like, na, 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 and he's like, the San Francisco 49ers have lost to the Dallas Cowboys 3 consecutive times, but Joe Montana, he is here
Yeah.
today to try and get his vengeance. But he's up against one thing, and then they show Ed Too Tall Jones for the Dallas Cowboys is not going to
Yep.
allow. So you're like, oh, okay, there's this character and there's this character, and I never thought about that though. The female angle. That's really cool that you said that, Lee. But this is why I love reading, because I'm like, okay, I want to understand. But what was the philosophy behind that? And so you and I are both into sports, so I love the sports stories. But this is the thing: is people connect to stories. They don't
Mm-hmm.
connect. You, you know, um, Salvation Army. They don't. Or actually, okay, I'll give you a better example. It's like the Shriners Hospital. They always show a bunch of kids with their heads shaved because they've just overcome cancer, and and then you have the crying parents, like, our kid, we could never have given him this kind of health care, but Shriners Hospital, they pay for everything. And I'm
Right.
like, I'm sitting there writing the check right there. I'm like, wow, and that's why I love stuff like that. My wife's
Yeah.
like, why are you so into sports, Danny? I'm like, because at any given moment, something amazing can happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It unfolds. I mean, like, I remember watching that game a couple of years ago. That I was watching the Monday night game. It was the Bengals against the Bills, and and I can't the cornerback for the Bills. He has a heart attack. He just
Yeah.
collapsed. And
Yeah.
I mean, and the teams, they just stopped the game. I mean, I'm like, oh my gosh, is this guy all right? And like, all of a sudden, the game didn't matter at all. Like, everybody,
No.
and even just watching the coach, Sean McDermott, he's talking to the coach for the Bengals, and the coach for the Bengals, like, he's like, "What do you think?" And he's like, "I don't know. I want to make sure my guy's all right. Like,
Yeah.
I don't care about a football game." And I was like, "Wow, it was just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're going off a total tangent, but this is the power of storytelling."
It's not really. And it's the power of storytelling. Absolutely. And I tell you what, that was a powerful story in a lot of ways, and a lot of people were able to take that incident and create stories around it. One for football, some against football, um, some for safety, all types of things. But it was a great story about the medical team that was out there, right? Because that kid, that young man, he basically died on the field. And for them to bring him back. So there were a lot of stories. And like you said, the creation of storytelling, thankfully that had a good ending. Thankfully
Yep,
he was able to recover, and he was,
yep.
he's been playing this year. limited, but playing. So good stories. All right, you've taught everyone from kids to educational leaders and corporate executives. What patterns do you see in how high performers use reading differently from everyone else?
Well, they read intentionally. It's the same way as putting
Mm-hmm.
together. I always, that's why I just told you is if you're an entrepreneur, you should read books about entrepreneurs. You shouldn't be. I mean, I shouldn't say that because a lot of times, you know, when you read it, I love reading about the presidents and President Clinton. He always said when there was a tense moment where he was trying to make an important decision, he would relax his mind by reading a mystery novel.
Mm.
Um, a lot of people forget this. JFK was having a press conference, and a reporter asked him what he was reading. He said, "Oh, I'm reading this cool spy book about this guy named James Bond." MGM executives were watching that press conference. They
Wow.
bought the rights to James Bond. The reason we have James Bond movies was because the president had a flippant comment about James Bond. But normally you want to be intentional. It's the same thing when I tell people about speaking. I'm like, this is the difference between a good speech and a great speech. Good speakers, they tell stories. Great speakers tell stories with intention. So I'll give you an example. I'm working with that. By the way, whenever I talk about the people I work with, I'm using different names because I believe in just a discretion for them. And so I'm working with a nutrition expert, Dr. Kathy, we'll call her.
Okay.
And she has a program. She grew up with this intestinal program, which nobody could figure out how to create a diet. And so she has a program for women with the same problem. And she sells the program. It's a 90-day program for 1997. And that's where she was ending her presentation. I'm like, wait a sec, you can't end your presentation there. You're missing half of your audience. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you got Joe Fridays and you got Julia Roberts in your audience. Joe Friday's the husband who's sitting there with his arms crossed, like, how much does this cost? How long is it
Mm-hmm.
going to take? What do I got to do? And that's great. You did a good job of doing that, but you're ignoring his wife, which is Julia Roberts. Julia Roberts, she doesn't care how much it costs. She just wants to feel good. I
Yeah.
listen to Lee's podcast because it makes me feel good. I love Lee. And she's like, well, how do I do that? I'm like, well, you got to create a story. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what do you want your audience to do? And after a couple of minutes of questioning her, she finally said, well, I want them to understand they can't do it on their own. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
you need to hire an expert story.
Mm.
Like, what's that? I'm like, I'll give you an example. I'll leave you with this. Many years ago, my wife and I, we get theater tickets. We were dressed to the nines, driving to the theater when we got a flat tire. My wife said, well, I'll call AAA and get a tow truck. I'm like, you don't have to call AAA. I'm a man. I can fix a flat tire. So I got out of the car. I opened up the trunk and I got out the spare tire. And then I got out the pumper thing and I got the big jack thing to try and take off the nuts on the tire. Basically, 27 minutes later, I have grease all over me. I've not fixed this flat tire. My wife's standing by the car with her arms crossed, shaking her head like I could have done so much better than this guy. Well, unbeknownst to me, she had called AAA. This tow
Mm.
truck shows up, and this 17-year-old punk hops out of the tow truck, and in 3 minutes flat, he fixes my flat tire. You know, I think there are times in life when all of us think we can do it on our own, but if you want to save time, you want to save money, you want to save a whole lot of headache and embarrassment,
Mm.
hire an expert. So what
Mm.
I've done is I've taken a story as what you were talking earlier, an analogy, a metaphor. I've taken a story, so now the audience is thinking, I've tried lots of things before, but wait, maybe I need to hire Dr. Kathy because she's the expert. She knows how to do this. Maybe that's the way to speed up this process. That's the difference between just a story and a story with intention. When you're reading, you want to read things with intention. So that's exactly my intention. Whenever I'm reading, I'm looking for where's the great story? Where's a story
Mm.
that what's a story? And I mean, this is actually an exercise you and everybody in your audience can do is later on sit in a comfortable chair with a pad and paper, libation of choice, and for an hour, just write down every story that's ever happened to you. And I don't mean the entire story, I just mean triggers. Like the time
Right.
I locked myself out of the car in front of Costco, the time dad spilled mustard on his tie at that fancy restaurant. You'll find in an hour, you can come up with hundreds of stories like this. So that's the first part of the exercise. The second part of the exercise is then I want you to figure out, well, what's this story really about? Oh, this is a
Mm.
story about never giving up. Oh, this is a story about loyalty. Oh, this is a story about paying attention. And so on my computer, I have hundreds of files with literally tens of thousands of stories. And so when I'm putting together a presentation and I need a story, I know exactly where to find the story for the emotion that I want to come up with. That's the
Wow.
difference between intention versus just some random story.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I need to intentionally do that because just in writing, like you've written 21 books, right? I'm still working on number one, and a lot of times I'm looking for those stories, and I have a lot of them, but intentionally I need to categorize them, I catalog them, right? So I have them at hand's length, right? Or at screen's length or at whatever you want to call it. When you're using a computer, it's different now. But I love that. And I definitely appreciate that. I think I'm going to absolutely do that today. I have some stories that I've written down, but if I just take an hour, I could probably knock out a lot of stories throughout time. So one, thank you, doctor. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Appreciate the remedy or whatever you want to call it.
Work with me, you'll have the book done in 2 months. I have a guy who I just worked with, and he had been trying to
Yeah.
get his book done for 20 years, and in 2 months we had his book done. And he told me something. He said, and it wasn't even, we were working on a speech, but then he talked about a book. I'm like, I can help you on the book, and the book got done. And he's like, Danny, you told me something that helped me get the book done. I'm like, what did I tell you? He said, you said, I got to come up with a different name. He's like, um, Richard, I'll call him Richard. He's like, I said, Richard, you got to write your crappy book. And that's what saved him. Because what I meant by that is no matter what you write the first time, unless you're Harper Lee, it's going to be crap.
Yeah.
And so what's going to happen is you're going to look at your book on that shelf and it's going to have your name on the spine and you're going to be proud of the book, but then you're going to be like, gosh, you know what? I can write better than that. So then you're going
Mm,
to do your second book. The second book will be better. It's just like anything in life. This is why I tell people when they're speaking or writing or anything, it's a skill. The way you get better is with the reps. It's always with the reps. I'll give you an example. My youngest daughter, she's learning how to drive right now, and she's so cute. We go into the car and she's adjusting mirrors, and she has her hands at the 10 o'clock and the 2 o'clock position. Lee, I promise you in a year, she'll be driving with one hand, eating a Big Mac, switching the radio station or whatever, because it'll be automatic and she'll be comfortable because she's done it lots of times. That's where the reason most people are nervous at anything is they're uncomfortable. They haven't
yes.
done it before. The more you do it, the more comfortable you get. I was just talking to a guy that's done the exact same eye procedure 70,000 times. And I'm like, well, if I ever need my eyes done, I'm going to you because you've done
Yeah.
it 70,000 times. You can do it in your sleep. That's how you watch most quarterbacks. I'm using sports again, but a
Mhm.
rookie quarterback's not nearly as good as the 16-year veteran. The 16-year veterans, they just look at the defense and it's like they already know what's going to happen. Everything. They're like, oh, okay, I know exactly what I got to do right here. And it's
Yeah.
not because they're necessarily, some of them are better, but it's not that they're necessarily better than the young guy. It's just they've seen a lot more. I mean, I watched Matthew Stafford for the LA Rams, and I'm like, man, it's like he sees the defense before they've even, but he's been in the league forever. He's got the
Mhm.
rep. I just read an autobiography by Chuck Yeager, the first person to break the sound barrier. And that's what he said. He's like, the best pilots aren't the coolest or anything. They're the ones with the most experience.
Yeah.
They know the situations. And so
Yeah.
that would be my advice to you is just get your bad booked out of you. And then you're going to say, I can do a better one. That's how you do it. It's
I
the
like it.
reps.
I like it. Hey, so I've asked you just a few questions. Um, and is there anything that we haven't talked about just yet? We talked about reading, speaking a little bit. We haven't talked too much about business, but I really wanted to emphasize the reading and the speaking part. Is there anything that you like to talk about that we haven't discussed yet?
No, uh, as a thank you for having me on, Lee, I wanted to give you and everybody in your audience a freebie. So if you go to freestoryguide.com, again, free story guide like a tour guide, freestoryguide.com, I'm going to give everybody their own complimentary, well-crafted story blueprint. What this is the actual process that my co-founder, Coach Jimmy Hayes Nelson, and I take our clients through to help you create your well-crafted story. What this does for you is it takes the guesswork out of where do I put this story and why am I putting it here? What this means for you is now you have a tool that's an actual system that is generating all of your audience, turning them into clients rather than just passive listeners. You can just get that at freestoryguide.com. And I guess the last thing I'll say, Lee, is exactly what I used to always tell my students, whether I was teaching my little ones or my older ones, as they exited my classroom for the day. They always had to hear the same refrain. I said, remember, kids, education is valuable, but execution is priceless. Knowledge is not power. Only applied knowledge is power. Knowing what the right thing to do and doing the right thing are two very different things. So let's go out, do the right thing, and make this world a better place.
All right, I got one last question for you. For the entrepreneur listening who thinks I'm too small for a communication strategy, what's a simple triangle-based framework that they can use to connect reading, speaking, and revenue?
I don't know if I can give one just based on the triangle, but I'll give you one of the biggest mistakes I see. Well, I'll give you the two biggest mistakes I see people make when they're giving presentations. The first one, I always say, stop bragging. Stop telling people about your successes. Start telling people about your failures, because not everybody in your audience has succeeded, but they've all failed. And the more you share your own failures, the more your audience is going to see themselves in you. And that's what you're ultimately that's your objective as a speaker, is how do I connect with my audience? How do I make them feel like I'm the answer to their problems? That's the first suggestion I would give to everybody. The second one, I see this all the time, is have one clear call to action. Former teacher, you have to bear with me. Everything I do either rhymes or it's alliterative. So I would say choices confuse and cause you to lose. So for example, I was on a podcast yesterday, and the hostess at the end of the podcast, she said, "Oh, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure you like, subscribe, and give us a 5-star review." And we got off the air. I'm like, you just asked your audience to do 3 different things. They ain't going to do any of them because you just confused them. And so the analogy I always tell people is, if you look at the biggest grocery store chains in America, Kroger's, Publix, H-E-B, Smith's, Ralph's, whatever, they're not the number one grocery store chain in America. The number one grocery store chain in America based on volume is Trader Joe's. And the reason is, when you go to your local major grocery store to get mustard, there's 38 different types of mustard. When you go to Trader Joe's, there's one type. It's called mustard. They made the choice for you. And that's how all you have to do is drive by a Chick-fil-A or an In-N-Out burger. You're always going to see a line of cars, because people know they're either getting burgers or chicken. They're not getting salad. They're not getting, focus. That's what I would tell your audience. And if you're a small entrepreneur, the other thing I'll tell them is, hey, before anybody's an expert, they start as an amateur. So stick with it. Don't quit. That's why I love the movie Rocky. The reason everybody loves Rocky is he's not the best fighter, but every time he gets hit, falls down on the mat, he gets back up. You're never going to lose if you keep on getting back up. And I read biographies of successful people all the time, and the one thing I know is none of them started successful. They all went through a lot of adversity to get there, and they just kept on getting back up, and they didn't take no for an answer. It's something I really admire in people. It's what I admire about you, Lee.
Thank you so much. Hey, and for anyone who wants to go deeper with you, your books, your speaking, or your programs, where can they find you and learn more about your work?
So I'm going to follow my own advice. I already gave one call to action. If you go to freestoryguide.com,
I like it.
I'm sure that'll put you on an email list where you'll be contacted by me every week for the rest of your life. But I would go to freestoryguide.com. Again, that's where you'll learn more about me. That's what I would say.
All right, perfect. Hey, Danny, thank you for sharing your wisdom, your stories, and some practical strategies on how reading and speaking can truly transform a business and a life. And for the listeners, let's see, I got to make sure I follow this advice. If this conversation sparks something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend who needs that push to communicate with more purpose. And make sure that you subscribe to Hindsight the Podcast on YouTube and your favorite listening platform so you don't miss the next episode. And until next time, remember, your past may have shaped you, but your next decision shapes who you become. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
That's hindsight.